Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
Morning, Pastor.
Good morning, Danilo. Good morning to all in the studio. I see you've got the very controversial Mr. Stephen Joachim in today.
Thank you, Pastor. you like me today? I hope you like me today because I have liked you.
Okay.
I hope you like me since I like you.
He says, Pastor, he says, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
I hate to love you. I love to hate you. Sometimes your brutal honesty is probably a very appealing characteristic.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning. I don't always agree with you, but I can count on you. Even when you're saying things that I don't like, I can count on you, to be honest. I heard you made reference to the article that I wrote in Eyewitness News.
Yes, an excellent article.
Yes, thank you. Which is something that I hope people will read and open their eyes as to what actually is at stake here. And you are actually pushing the limits of thought on what additional nuances are involved in the decisions that we are making about, the COVID-19 pandemic and how we are relating to it. You're going beyond the dimension of health. You're bringing some provocative thought as to the value of life. I don't agree with everything that you are saying on the value of life, mind you, but I also don't like the hypocrisy of others who cherry pick when they apply the issues related to the matter of value of life. I mean, we really, really cherry pick. People don't have any problem. I have said, Stephen, that I was one of the first, I think. I didn't hear anyone saying that this is a war-like situation in relation to the COVID pandemic. A week or two after, I heard U.S. commentators referring to it as a sort of a war. And we have to have the same kind of mentality. In war, there's a term, casualty of war, Stephen. It is used meaningfully. You're going to fight a war. You know what you are protecting. You know what matters to the constructs of life within your country that you are protecting. You're protecting not just physical life. You're protecting a society. You're protecting a way of life. You're protecting an economy. When Churchill, for example, was involved in the Allied War, Second World War, these are many soldiers died. Dunkirk, the invasion there. Many lives were lost on that bay in that invasion, which basically turned the tide of World War. If you're a history buff, you would know that. I mean, you're sacrificing. Don't think I'm going down your road there, Stephen, but I'm just putting a different context. You are sacrificing life in a war situation for certain other values, certain other freedoms, certain other liberties. Follow where I'm going with this. You're sacrificing the lives of some. You have declared war. These young men are going to go to war. They are going to die. You are sacrificing life. But at the other end, what are you saving? What are you preserving? What are you fighting for? What is the blood being shed for? The blood is being shed to preserve life as you know it, to preserve the structures of your society as you know it, to preserve the liberties and freedoms within your society as you know it. When Stalin and then after that Hitler, they were making their westward march, taking in Paris and France and Poland and taking in all of these. It was basically a step towards world conquest and changing life as they knew it then. And the Allied forces decided that we're going to preserve our society, we're going to preserve our liberties, we are going to preserve. And that preservation, hear me and hear me well, that preservation of life and that preservation of liberty and life as they know it within their civil society, that preservation came at a cost. It came at the cost of lives. In every war, you are going to lose lives. But then you make a decision, as the leaders of the world did back then. The leaders of the world made the decision what matters in the long run. What are the fundamental things for which we must fight? and what are the fundamental things for which some people must die for. And again, decisions in government and decision in wartime and decision in COVID pandemic time are not made on the basis of black and white, but they are made in the realm of the gray, which means that there is no right and there's no clear and absolute right, there's no clear and absolute wrong, and therefore, like using Einstein's theory of relativity, you're going to have to make your decision on the basis of how it relates to other things. What is relatively then more important? And there's the point. What is relatively more important? And as I listened to Stephen's argument this morning, he is asking what is relatively more important. The preservation of life as we know it, the preservation of society, the preservation of economic order, the preservation of social structures, or are we going to sacrifice all of these without thinking in order to to have a certain measure of security in the face of the pandemic? So Stephen, that's my commentary on what you shared this morning. All right?
Thank
I don't
you,
know if you have a question.
I think you're absolutely correct. That was my point. And we need to think about where we are going, because otherwise we will end up in what I fear will be a very dark place, accidentally, without even realizing how we got there.
Yeah,
we need
again,
to be careful.
Students of history understand this kind of argument better, but students, I think part of the, and I really would hope that people will read my article in Eyewitness News about the Trojan horse, because again, the tragedy back then with Troy is that they were so invincible for 10 years that war had basically been waged on them, and the great mighty army of Sparta was getting nowhere until they decided, okay, we're going to put up this Trojan horse outside, and the people of Troy decided, we're pulling this thing in. They didn't stop to think, and that was my point. They did not stop to think. If you've got a certain measure of security and your city is structured in a particular way, before you introduce any new thing, before you pull in any new thing into your system, stop to think what's inside the belly, and how it is going to affect your world as you know it. Apart from the social arguments, apart from the economic arguments that have been raised there, the matters of the social arguments and how it is going to affect our society. Social capital is something that matters to me. Let me say this again. Social capital. Our society is structured on the basis of the operation of social capital, the value of social institutions and what they bring to the ordering of society. I am talking about the ordering of the society in terms of your home, family, church, religion, school, education. Stephen, you referred to that this morning.
Yep.
And how basically in a time of education revolution, what impact might this have on the trajectory of the education revolution? How effective, for example, you were asking, how effective would this be in the long haul? If we were to do this for a month or 2 or 3, or maybe even down the road? So the social institutions bring social capital. The disruption in business, which I think you did a good job also of outlining how this is going to affect our economy. You made reference, I think someone made reference to Gaston Brown, and he's saying, well, I'm not going to have the money to pay my civil servants, and you say this is likely to happen here. So hear me and hear me well. Before we rush into these things and before we sacrifice for a measure of safety, now again, don't get me wrong, and I don't think Stephen was missing the point for those who are bashing him. I don't think Stephen is minimizing the threat of COVID or the fact that you need to be taking certain things. In fact, I hear you actually advocating measures that can be taken to minimize the spread of COVID, but not necessarily go overboard and sacrifice things that you ought not to sacrifice. The question I want to ask, can COVID be stopped without the imposition of draconian measures?
Good question.
That's
a good question, Pastor. It seems to me like we have decided that it can't without actually checking and verifying that there may be options.
And which I hear you on that. Now hear me on this, right? When stop and think, how is COVID spread? So I have stopped and I've given thought to how is COVID spread. COVID is, as far as we know, it's a respiratory the disease. Some are giving some other theories about suspension in air, etc., etc. But as far as the preponderance of science goes on this, it is a respiratory disease injected into your body or making its entrance into your body through primarily your nose and your mouth. And how does it get there? It doesn't just jump up off a chair or jump up off a handrail or a door and go to your mouth or your nose. It basically is transferred either through someone coughing directly and you're in the path of the cough, 6 feet away or 3 to 6 feet away, and that then it goes into your system that way. Alternately, if your hand touches a surface that has the virus and you put your hand towards your mouth or your nose, that's how it gets there. So we have to be very clear on what the science says in terms of how the virus gets into your body. So in order to stop this, then you actually, the most effective way is therefore shut the door, and those two particular doors. Yep. The two particular doors are if people cough directly on you or sneeze directly at you, these droplets, if they get to you before they descend onto a hard surface or to any surface, then they enter your body. So you shut that down. How? By wearing a mask. Yep. Or by safe distancing, and I prefer that term, safe distancing, as opposed to social distancing. You safe distance from people. So I am not going to be, try as much as possible not to be anywhere near people, particularly if they're coughing. So that's one effective mean. But it doesn't mean that I can't go about my business as usual with care. That is the disconnect that I'm not getting, Stephen. I am not getting the disconnect in terms of why do I have to lock myself away at home? If someone presents to me a very sane and cogent argument as why I absolutely have to. Or even the matter of if I can wash my hands, if it can be sure that after I touch surfaces that I disinfect my hands, I take care of that kind of personal hygiene. I think that these things are going to be actually effective at preventing or slowing down the spread of the virus. So I am not one of those, and I have been very clear from the beginning, I am not one of those who's on the bandwagon of an absolute shutdown as I see taking place in other countries. Secondly, I have made an argument that I was ridiculed for. In fact, some people chose to excoriate me on the matter of the survivability of the virus here in let's say invincible. Let's forget tropics, okay? What is the science saying in terms of the prevalence and spread of the virus in colder countries or colder temperature vis-a-vis the same kind of chances of survivability and spread of the virus in warmer temperature? And I heard Anthony Fauci and Cuomo and others making reference to this matter of how does the virus behave in warm temperature. I was very relieved over the weekend to see finally that out of the U.S., their research team, their researchers finally gave, and I don't think it was premised by a concern for countries in the warmer climate. I think it was premised by the fact that summer is approaching in the U.S. Okay? Yep. Summer is approaching in the U.S., and you cannot, I'm telling you, I've lived there, you can't confine. Yep. This is their time to go on the lakes, to go boating, to go to the parks, to go not hunting, to go mountain climbing and mountain biking and all of that. And so now I was like, this is so convenient. All of a sudden, their science is saying what I've been saying all along. Yep. That in warmer temperatures, that you have a higher measure of safety. And I'm like, duh. I mean, we have been behaving as if in our parts. We have been behaving as if We have had a winter here. It's winter time, and we don't have the privilege and the blessing of warmer temperatures. We have been behaving as if we are a cold country climate. I have asked that the behaviors and the responses to the COVID reflect your conditions where you are and the chances of survivability of the virus.
Correct.
But I have watched and now remember I'm no governmental official, but I've watched and I've shaken my head as to how we have responded here as if our conditions, climatic conditions, were absolute carbon copies of Sweden or Scandinavia or USA or UK. And I'm like, guys, again, I'm not minimizing the threat of COVID that it can spread, but I'm saying that the likelihoods and the chances, I talked about risk probabilities and all of these things that must be taken into account. Marlon really was one of those who excoriated me for talking about risk probabilities. But I talked about risk probabilities. When you have high risk probability, then you manage the spread in a different way when you have low risk probability.
Yep.
Anyways, I've gone on and on without giving you guys a chance to interject.
Pastor, you're preaching to the converted.
Well, to you, but I don't know that there are many people out there that agree with me.
No.
And thirdly,
but there's a reason that Florida's rates are substantially lower than New York's too. There is a reason that the hot parts of Africa haven't experienced what's happening now. Just as similarly, you are beginning to see a spike in South Africa. Why do you think that is? Because they're heading into winter.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? I mean, but people instead think that we should have taken... You remember Marlon almost killed me once, right? Because he wanted to shut down everything, and we should apply the same rules that they do in Canada to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I said, no, we shouldn't. Why should we? Let's be sensible here. And I'm very happy that our government did not apply those same ridiculous rules, because they were not necessary in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they are still not necessary. And I'll go beyond that. They need to show some political courage now and get our kids back into school, please.
Well, here's the problem. Here is the problem there, Stephen. I have often said that feathers are easier to let into the wind than to regather. It's easier to take a bag of feathers and, throw it into the wind. Let the wind blow, and it's gone. Wow, we should have not have done that. Well, go try collect the feathers.
Yep.
Think very carefully before you let the feathers into the wind. Yep. All right?
Pastor, that's what we're not doing. We've given very little thought to how do we come out of this situation now.
Exactly my point.
And as a matter of fact, if you listen to Andrew Cuomo, who's the governor of New York, and the kind of things he's talking about, to me it almost makes excuses for not coming out. Oh, we have to make sure we have this first, we have to have that first. You know, we're finding all kinds of reasons to not let people be free.
I've traveled a lot on the highways all across the USA. I mean, I just enjoy the highways, driving to different states, different capitals, different places. One of the things that I learned earlier, Clark, right? If I'm going to take an exit ramp off the highway, I have done it often enough to know that sometimes I take an exit ramp and it's hell for me to find the entrance ramp back onto the highway. You would know what I mean. Exactly. Sometimes I have to go to a town before I'm like, where's this entrance ramp? And that, I'm talking about days before my GPS and all of that, right? Let me tell you something, and I have learned, therefore, that I don't, even if I have to stop for gas or bathroom break or to a truck stop, I will not get off on an exit ramp until I'm very certain about the entrance ramp. And I think the problem with this, permit me to say, is that we are taking exit ramps and we are not thinking about the entrance ramp back on. Now, if at one death or one case, you are going to, the rationale is not clear to me. If at one case, you are going to make certain measures, take your exit ramp and exit ramp from what is normal and begin to shut down this and shut down that, right? And then it goes from 1 case to 5 cases to 12 cases. Then clearly by a rational and logical argument, you can't get back to normal until you have 0 cases.
Correct.
Because if at one case you are willing to shut down your economy, then you can't open up when you get back down from 12 to 1. You're going to have to keep things shut down until you get back to 1.
But Pastor, this is why they're changing their argument now, because they now realize the economic devastation is simply not worth it. So they're now trying to get on, because what you're saying is absolutely correct. You shut down the world because a few people got this infection. A lot more people have it now. Because you've supposedly turned the curve, now you're suddenly deciding, but it's going to it's going to rise back up again, isn't it? Because if you're saying that's how it was spread, how is it not going to continue spreading?
Exactly. My argument, be consistent. I said this a long time ago, be consistent. And if at one case you are going to clamor and call for a shutdown, then you really should not clamor and call for a reopening until you get back down to 0 case.
Yep.
So we have to be very careful. And in that case, how do I project this thing down through the months and maybe into next year? When can we be guaranteed that we get to 0 case? If at one case we should shut down the country, then your argument is, if we don't get back to 1 case, we can't open up the country. What if that takes until next year? I don't know that is a valid argument. My last point concerns certain anomalies here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I don't know what to make of these anomalies that I'm seeing, and somebody needs to help me and educate me. When I say the anomalies, I'm talking in terms of case, that reported case. I have questions. I don't understand, Stephen, how many, I looked at something last night that the Ministry of Health, I think Luke Brown had it on his page, number of deaths here in St. Vincent related to COVID, and I saw 0. I asked myself, is somebody hiding something? You hear me? Have we had more deaths here in St. Vincent related to COVID? By now, 2 months in, if all that the people have been saying and those who have been fanning the flames of fear and panic, we ought to have at least, if we are going to have X amount of thousands of deaths, we should have at least had 1 or 2 or 3 deaths along that road.
If you predicted 2,000 deaths, you'd expect things to be far worse, wouldn't you?
Well, that's a little anomaly there. I mean, somebody might have an explanation. But I even check with I do check, I check. I'm like, no, we don't have any. Has there been an increase in? No, we haven't seen anything. So I'm like, that's an anomaly.
So why then, Pastor? I can't see the justification for closing schools and keeping schools closed. I don't get it. Am I missing something logically? Because somebody needs to tell me why the schools are closed.
Well, again, to your point, I know certain teachers are very excited over that.
I believe it's the teachers who put pressure on the government, said they don't want to open back up the schools, and they don't want to go to work. Whether that's just pure laziness or real concern, I don't know which it is.
The other anomaly that I am looking at in terms of, the fact that here in St. Vincent, okay, is it true that there are people who are? Is it true that, first of all, that every single case outside of the imported case, outside of the imported case, is it true that every single local case is asymptomatic?
Well,
I mean, seriously, think about it.
Apparently it has to be, right?
Well, yeah. The
definition.
alternative, what's the conspiracy why people are coming down with symptoms and are not calling the hotline and being tested?
Well, Pastor, is it also not true that it so happens that the regular flu is also going around at this time?
Yeah, well, we're coming to the tail end of that, frankly.
Exactly, we're almost past that now too. So I mean, and what you suggest? People might have the symptoms but don't want to call the hotline?
Well, that seems to be the argument out there, because I am thinking that in an era where every cough has to be explained, every sneeze you have to write a paragraph of 450 words, I think people would be very quick, to be calling in.
Yep.
So I think people, look, the evidence to me, as far as I'm concerned, the evidence to me is that what is real, I would accept what is real until I see something to the contrary. And what is real is that we have X amount of imported cases. What is real to me, until I see otherwise or it's substantiated otherwise, what it is real to me is that people are not coming down in our communities with, COVID-19. There's not been any community spread. I don't know how long this will hold for, but at this current moment, there is none, and therefore we are making decisions and taking action and calling for certain decisions that's basically based on what? Supposition?
Yep.
I don't know. Yesterday, I'm closing. Yesterday, I gave a presentation on fear and faith, and I was very pleased that people took it well. I was very cautious that there would be certain pushback when I spoke about the national anthem and all of that. But let me take this opportunity to thank those who took what I said yesterday to heart and are re-examining the value of faith in crisis. Now, Stephen, this is where we depart, but my faith has found the resting place, and it is in God. And it is that faith, and it is my belief in God that even if things will take a turn for the worse here, and I still have this kind of axial foundational faith that says that I have something that keeps my life together, and I will want to highlight that as the climax of my presentation today. All right, take care, guys.